Hello, everyone. My name is Joanne Lockwood, and I'm your host for the Inclusion Bites podcast. In this series, I've interviewed a number of amazing people and simply had a conversation around the subject of inclusion, belonging, and generally making the world a better place for everyone to thrive. If you'd like to join me in the future, then please do drop me a line to joe.lockwood@seechangehappen.co.uk. That's SEE changehappen.co.uk. You can catch up with all of the previous shows on iTunes, Spotify, and the usual places. So plug in your headphones, grab a decaf, and let's get going. Today is episode 49, with the title Building Stepping Stones to a Better Future. And I have the absolute honour and privilege to be joined by Rachel Oliver. Rachel describes herself as a media broadcaster and presenter. And when I asked Rachel to describe her superpower, she said it is the fact she is Australian through and through. She's dual national and proudly Aussie, first and foremost, and that is her superpower. Hello, Rachel. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Joe, and thank you. That was a great welcome, and it's brilliant to be here. And let's just go into the Australian bit. I'm a dual national, and I was born here in the UK, in the north of England. So for 20 years, I have a very, very broad accent. And then I went to live in Australia. And I was there for about 34 years and 34 fantastic years, and working there and in the Middle East as well. We can go into that if you like at some stage. But since coming back here, I've been back about 3-4 years now. And my Australian accent waxes and wanes very much depending on if I've spoken to home recently, and my kids are still out there. But you will hear some Australianisms, and you'll also hear some, you'll hear some broad, flat vowels because I'm in Rochdale and that's what we celebrate here. So the other superpower I've got, by the way, I just want to get into that, is, well, I'm a transgender woman. I reckon that trumps just about every other superpower that there is. But it's not me 100%. I happen to be transgender. So that's why I actually don't use it as a superpower as such, because it's just there as part of me. I'm multifaceted. I've got loads of facets and lots of experience in life. I've done many things, and I've got plans to do many more. But my big passion currently, and has been for the last couple of years, is broadcasting. And that's an area I never expected to get into. It came as a massive surprise to me that I had this capability, if you like, and it's God-given, I reckon. It's something that must have been there, just needed the right circumstances to bring it out, and now it's come. My God. And I write my own stuff as well, so I'm.
Didn't I see you on a TV show a year or so ago? Did I see you on telly one day?
Well, I've been on the telly a couple of times, and but yeah, you saw me probably strutting my stuff on First Dates, Valentine's Day special last year. That was me.
That's the one I remember.
And that was the door. That was the door that suddenly swung open. This closed door into another world swung open, and that's how I got into media, if you like. It's just been life-changing. It gave me such a vast understanding of myself and my capabilities, and that I wanted to know more. So I did investigate, deeper, and I was asked to do a radio program with who I work with at the moment, which is Sonda Radio. And I was asked to represent the LGBT Foundation here in Manchester. And just on a small talk they were doing, and on death and dying, what a subject. I mean, come on. But I'm a nursing background. I've got an extensive nursing background. I was a registered nurse for many, many years. So I reckon I could talk about death and dying and how it affects us as trans people, and it does. So I wrote loads of notes. I'm a prolific writer of notes, and I wake up in the middle of the night and write notes, believe it or not. I have a thing at the side of my bed now, so that I can do it without actually opening one eye. But honestly, I've gone off now. But let's just come back to what I was saying about how I got into it, because I did this program and I had 15 minutes of fame. That's the radio program. And I had so many notes that I hadn't touched. So I actually contacted the radio station and said, look, if you need a transgender person to actually, you know, a bit of input, count me in. The producer contacted me and said, look, yeah, we're interested, but, you know, write a synopsis, if you like, of what your show's going to be about. And we'll make the show. And naively, I said, well, who's going to write the show? And it just went blank at the other end of the phone for a few seconds. And then I realized, to my horror, that it was me who was going to be the script writer. So I was given some pointers, not very many, but I was given some. And I was given what's called a run sheet. In the trade, we use what's called a run sheet, where you put down your notes and your tracks and everything. And I produced a show, and I've just written show number 35, I think it is. And I've got, each show begets more. So I've got I could probably double the amount of shows that I even now, because each one suggests doing something else. So, and I love it. It's just, and not only that, because we're trans people, or I'm a trans person, what it does is it allows me to express myself and basically talk about being trans in this world. And I've got two parts of my program which are pretty constant. Most programs run around about the same in content. The content differs, but there's two solid bits in the program. And one of them is I'll bust a trans myth, which I love doing. I mean, I'm a trans myth buster. So I'll do that, and then and I'll integrate it into the program. It always falls in somewhere. And later on in the program, I'll do a trans ally, or a trans icon, as I call them. And they can be transgender male, female, non-binary, or even non-trans allies. And I have, on a couple of occasions, brought in a non-living thing, if you like. One of the great ones I did was I did the pill in one, the 1967 pill, if you like, because that changed the structure of society so massively overnight that I thought it deserved icon status. So that I'll bring them in, and I'll usually the trans icons are known, certainly known to the trans world, but they might not be known to our allies. And by the way, I made trans allies an entire icon in one program. I took the allyship and made it the icon, because I think our allies are our most important people. Yeah.
So I think it's fantastic. You've got your own radio show, which you self-present, you edit, or well, maybe not edit, but you certainly curate it. You find your guests and things like that. That's really fantastic. So, what's the kind of viewing figures? You know, is it a Rochdale sort of centred sort of station? Is it?
No. Well, first of all, I work with my producer, who's also my sound engineer. And if you hop over and have a listen anytime, and I'm hoping that people will, my sound engineer is called Dom. I've got a great sense of humour and a fantastic relationship with Dom. I love him to bits. He's excellent at his job. And I ask him if he'll put some. I love sound effects. I'm a real fan of sound effects and playing with sound. And I'll ask him, to integrate into I'll put little notes in my scripts, if you like. Just, can you do this? Can I have sirens? Can I have this? Can I have helicopters? I've got one with helicopters, believe it or not. All that kind of thing. And he actually does it. And it's very, very professional. Now, Sonder is a Manchester-based radio station, if you like. We work from central Manchester, near to the old Coronation Street buildings. In fact, I think the building we're in used to be part of the Coronation Street set at one stage. And that's where we work and record from and do all our magic, if you like. It goes out to Manchester, but it also goes out worldwide. This is the beauty of my program. It's a podcast. It goes out on the day, so but on whatever, and it's not set days I work. I do a lot of specials. So, for instance, I've just done one for Halloween, so that went out on Halloween night. I've got another one coming out in a couple of weeks' time. And then I've got a special for Christmas Day, which is an Aussie Christmas, believe it or not. So, and the reason I'm doing Australian Christmas, if you like, is I've got a lot of Australian listeners. So they hop on to Radio Garden, I think it's called, and they can get the podcast, or they can listen in directly on Sonder Radio on Christmas Day or on the day. So I've got people that write to me and friends that say, can I listen to your program in virtually all over the world? So I've got America, Australia, quite a few in Europe.
Yeah. So all over the world. So you've got a real kind of global audience. So before we came online and I pressed the record button, we were talking about this building stepping stones to a better future, and how tell me what we're talking about. Tell me about your ethos on this. Around, I mean, I identify as trans. You identify as trans. So this is a trans podcast at the moment. So
yeah,
tell me about this stepping stones. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so stepping stones. How I fit into the stepping stone ethos, if you like, as a trans person is. The way I look at it is we are today's generation of transgender people. And part of being trans now is that we are representative of our community, if you like, now. We're going to pass what we do now into the future. So for people that are not trans yet, or maybe for people that are maybe not born yet, we're going to pass what we do on this planet for our community onto them. Similarly, people from previous generations, people like April Ashley and Lily Elb. I mean, these are two enormous transgender icons. And one of the biggest one, of course, is Martha P. Johnson, probably the biggest one. Not all of them have passed yet. I think April's very much alive, but the others have passed, they've gone. But what they did is they put down the ground rules, if you like. They leveled it off, and they identified the issues. A lot of the issues that they identified, we're still fighting. In fact, we've taken a step back in the last 3 or 4 years, definitely taken a step back, back to when April Ashley transitioned. That's how far we've gone back, I reckon, anyway. And it's our job to represent and push this forward. And it hurts. It's going to hurt us. We're in pain. We're in definite pain.
You said we're going backwards. I mean, in what way are we going backwards? I mean, do we ever get forwards? I mean, how far have we gone back? What's the things that, I mean,
Well,
I mean, I talk about this often, but yeah, let's hear your perspective on what it's like to be trans in the world today. Why have we gone backwards?
um, we were making quite serious headway. We were taking 2 steps forward and maintaining those steps. I'll just give you a bit of background. I started transition around about 50 years old, approximately. I'm 63. No, I'm 62 now. Whoa, giving myself a year. I'm 62 now, so I've been transitioning or been a trans woman for 12 years. And I've seen some I started in Australia, by the way, transitioning, and I've seen some enormous changes in how we are perceived. And for about 4 or 5 years ago, or certainly before I came to the UK, it was still difficult being transgender, but I could see that we were making movements forward. Then I moved here, and then I realized that there were political issues going on here that maybe were going to cause us some problems. This is about 4 years ago now. And what I've noticed is in those 4 years whilst I've been here, we definitely have taken steps back. We're having to defend our rights now, whereas before there were rights that were just there. We didn't have to defend them. They were there. They were in law. They were relatively secure. But now what I'm finding is that those laws are now being put into question, and we're having to defend ourselves quite robustly nowadays because we are slipping back. Now, if we go back, you're relatively around about the same generation as me. So if we go back to the 1960s, the late 50s, sorry. If we go back to the 1960s and the early 60s, trans people could self-identify then. And they seem to have more freedom then than we have now. So we have this problem now about self-identification now, rightly or wrongly. It depends which side of the coin you're on. I mean, I'll state my coin. I believe in self-identification, and yep.
But don't we self-declare, self-identify anyway? I mean, I went to my doctor. I said, "Doctor, help me. I'm trans. I want you to refer me to a clinic." And in the meantime, I asked him to write a letter, which I could send to the passport office. I applied for my driving license. I did my own deed poll, got 2 friends to sign it in a pub.
Yeah.
None of that involved any form of onerous process. So what's all the fuss about self ID then? I mean, we talk about it seems to be a major
Yeah.
issue in society. What's the big deal? I've self ID'd and I'm living my life successfully. What's the
Yeah.
challenge that people are facing?
Exactly. That's exactly what. That's absolutely exactly right. I was amazed when I started to do the legal aspects of transitioning, and I do have to say I started this in Australia, but because I'm dual national, I also had to do some British stuff as well. So I hadn't had a British passport for a long time, and I just had my Australian passport. And then when I decided I wanted to come and live here, I decided that I obviously needed a British passport because I had to claim my place. And I thought, oh, this is going to be hard because I'm applying for a passport now in another name and another gender, and this is just going to be horrific. And I was amazed from a distance, but we're talking here. I'm sat there in Perth, 12,000 miles away, and couldn't believe how easy it was. There were a couple of blips along the way. There was one little blip about I had to go to my GP, and by the way, I had a fantastic GP in Australia, and the wording wasn't quite what the passport office required. So being an Australian, and we are very upfront. Aussies are generally upfront, and they won't take any nonsense off anybody, myself included. And he said, "Oh, this is ridiculous." But what he did is he read my letter and he wrote the exact words that the passport office had written, and that's all. He actually professed them and said, well, they've got to be happy with this. And of course it went through and I got my passport. So you're right, we do self-identify. I mean, we don't wake up one morning and say, do you know what, it's a nice sunny day today, I think I'll be a transgender woman. We don't do it. And that's a ridiculous thing. But hey, some people actually think that's what we do. So
we actually spend half our life trying not to be. We spend all of that time repressing it and pushing it back, doing everything we can not to transition, not to be honest with ourselves. It's far the opposite. We're not rushing out and celebrating this. We're fighting it, and eventually we can't stop ourselves. It becomes necessary, and I think often we're misrepresented by people who have an agenda that I don't fully understand myself. But the frustrating thing with the Gender Recognition Act review that went out on in 2018, that Theresa May's government started and then got stuck in the mud under Boris and Brexit and COVID and everything else that seems to have buried it, is that it doesn't offer any solution for people who are non-binary. I mean, as a binary trans woman myself, you are, as trans masculine friends I have, trans men, we can largely change our passport, driving license, and continue in the world. We can, after a bit of fuss, we can mostly access hormones and treatment. It's not easy sometimes, but it's quite onerous. But there is nothing currently that someone who identifies non-binary can do under the law. They can't have a gender-neutral passport. They can't have gender-neutral driving license. They can't have government official documents that aren't binary male or female. And that's the frustration. So I think that's the key issue around the Gender Recognition Act reform, is the protection for non-binary. The other stuff, yes, it's important. Yes, we need it. Yes, we need that protection. But there's a whole sector of society, the non-binary individuals, who aren't included at all or protected at all. And that's the frustration. And I think we saw, it was Rose Taylor versus Jaguar Land Rover, where they've under their employment tribunal, they verified the fact that people who identify as non-binary are covered by the protected characteristics of gender transition, or the intention of transitioning, whatever the wording is of the Equality Act. So non-binary people do have protection under the law now, but they can't do a fundamental human right of having a passport in their own ID. And that's the frustration, I think, with what's going on at the moment. I can live with a bit of inconvenience. You know, if I die, they're going to bury me with my birth name. Yeah, and if I've got a really not helpful vicar or celebrant, they're going to call out my birth name or my dead name at my funeral, which is going to upset everybody. Or if I wanted to get married again, which I don't, I'd have to get married in my birth assigned gender. So to me, that's the only difference it makes. You know, I'm not worried about my pension at the moment. You know, I think pensions are going to be complicated for everybody. So yes, it's important for me to have that birth certificate, but it doesn't give me a key to the toilet. It doesn't give me a right to do anything else other than die, get married, and be legally recognised. So I can largely live without that. It's the non-binary people that I'm concerned about.
I think that's been picked up very much in, as you know, that recently they asked for submissions, if you like, and I think some for the changes in the Act. And I think a lot of people, trans people, wrote in and said, there were various ways that people responded, and some of them were, went all the whole hog, if you like, of, well, we want X, Y, and Z, and we want this all changing, and self-identification will give us that. But what they didn't realize, what people a lot don't realize, is that we can do various things. As you've just pointed out, we can access certain things. Yes, there are end of life considerations, and which are quite serious. But if you're willing to live with them, then you can, and you're not going to be the one who's dealing with it anyway. Somebody else is going to be dealing with that. So I can understand what you're saying there. What I'm amazed by is I have a friend. I have two transgender people here in my village, and we're very good friends, all three of us. And one of them has got a certificate, and two of us haven't. And there is no difference in the lifestyle between the one who has and the two who haven't. And I reckon that's pretty significant. It's just literally a piece of paper that you stick on the wall. She has a certificate, and you stick it on the wall, and so what? Big deal. And I think that's been picked up in this inquiry.
So what you're saying then is you haven't suddenly turned into crazy people who are threats to society or destroying family values or all the other things we're accused of. You're just three people getting on with life, trying to be happy, not causing anybody any inconvenience, and probably constructive and valuable members of society. That's all we want to be, isn't it? Really.
That's it. And I think people, I don't know what people think about it. Actually, I don't think people think at all. The way I live my life is I'm not transgender above everything with a big sign over my head, and everything else is subservient to that. Being transgender is just another part, or it's just another part of my life. I mean, as I described myself earlier on, I'm very multifaceted, but many facets. And what I do, I mean, I'm a military dealer, for God's sake. I've been a gold prospector. I've done honestly, but it's unbelievable when I look back at my life. But none of these were. You couldn't put trans at the beginning. Oh, she's a trans military dealer, or she's a trans gold prospector. That would be ridiculous. So it's
gold
just
digger. You're a trans gold digger. you're a real gold digger.
I think what it does do, Joel, is I think it gives us another viewpoint which frightens people, because we can look, and you'll be able, I'm sure you'll agree with this. We can look at a situation from entirely two aspects of life. We can look at the male aspect and the female aspect. And I reckon that's a saleable commodity. It's absolutely saleable, because they're getting a 360-degree viewpoint on an issue instead of a one-sided issue, 180 degrees view, and then having to bring another person in to have a look who's the opposite gender and say, what do you reckon to it? Because they always say when they do surveys, don't they, men and women, they've got it here in one package. And I make a joke of this. I have in the past made a joke of it when I've been in employment and said, you do, and I did it in my last job when I applied for it and got the job. And I did say at the interview, well, laughingly, but seriously, you do realize that you're going to have to pay me two salaries. And the person interviewing me looked absolutely aghast, serious, because they were going through the idea in their head, oh my God, this person's asking for another salary. And I played along with it a little bit and said, you do realize that you're getting two people for the one job, so you have to pay me twice. And I played about with it for a bit of while, and then we had a laugh about it. But I did mean it in a funny kind of way to explain to them that exactly what they're getting. They're getting an all-rounder. I mean, we are the true all-rounders, And if you go back in history, Joe, I'm sure you'll know this. And this is about stepping forward, by the way. This is come back to what we were saying about stepping forward. So if we look back at generations that have come before us, and we go back quite a way back, say back 200 years maybe, and we go to places like North America and the Indians, the Red Indian. I always want to say Red Indians, but if you said that, I'm sure they'd be appalled if you said that. But
No,
I always think of
Native
McCarthy,
Americans. Yeah, Native
Native
Americans is
American,
probably, or
Red Indians.
First Nation. Some people prefer First Nation, the
Yeah,
indigenous population. There's better terms, but yeah, I know what you mean.
there's
Yes.
better terms. And as you say, the back from where I'm from, we have the indigenous Aborigines, if you like. I don't like the word Aborigine. And funnily enough, I don't use that word and I don't like it, but they are called the indigenous population. But if we just go back and look at North American indigenous population and we look at Australian indigenous population, way back in history, they had a third gender. The islanders in the Pacific have a third gender. They actually have a name for it. The Indians in the subcontinent of India have a third gender. And these people are highly respected. This third generation is actually, it's almost godlike. It's celebrated, and they're given or were, I think they still are in some instances, given a special place in society because their societies recognize that these people do have something about them that's different, maybe a different way, a different sight. We could call them woke, I suppose, which is a horrible word that they're using now, and they're trying to destroy that word. But I do think we have another eye. We have a third eye. I reckon we, as trans people, we have a different viewpoint on society, and that's part of this stepping forward. That we need to nurture this, and we need to hold it in absolute respect and pass it forward into the next generation because they're going to take it.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I mean, I lived a lot of my life socialized and brought up as a male, as a person who, I networked, I hung out with mainly men, or male only groups, male only clubs, and I didn't. Yes, it's like privilege. You don't realize the privilege you have when you breathe it in all the time. It's not until you lose that privilege, you come out of that echo chamber into a different echo chamber, or you come out of that environment, you suddenly realize what it feels like to be from an oppressed or marginalized or stigmatized community, and suddenly this hits you in the face like opening the door of a freezer or something. It just blows into your face. You go, wow. In my previous life, I never had any idea. It wasn't that I was, well, I wasn't asleep to injustice. But obviously I wasn't fully woke. I wasn't awoken to what's going on. And as a white male at the time, I didn't even grasp the need or the awareness. I was just doing my thing. And now I think having transitioned, having shared and jettisoned a large proportion of my privilege, but not only jettisoned some privilege, but taken on the baggage of an oppressed minority group that is under attack. I now look around the world and I see it completely differently. And I think when you talk about some of these other cultures, in our past as a nation and Europe and other, we exported Christianity, religion, with colonialism, and we imprinted these values around the binary, around what the definition of right or wrong. And we set back other cultures that evolved independently and independently evolved into having multiple genders, and then oppressed that concept, not only in those countries but also in our own country. And we're still fighting those biblical. I mean, it's using a Christian analogy. I'm not just trying to be Christian here. There are other religions, obviously, but using the biblical definitions of right and wrong, family values, good and bad, and policing people into these boxes about how they can't behave or identify, because people are now feeling that it's disrupting their whole sense of the world. It's like shock horror. Sorry, we made this shit up several thousand years ago. We kept talking about this stuff. We made up more shit, and then we've suppressed and oppressed the masses with it. And now the masses are going, hang on a minute, this is all BS. Why do we have to live by this made up stuff around the binary gender, the binary roles? We can escape that program. And I think
Yeah,
that's what's challenging people when they realise that they don't have to follow this doctrinated BS that we've propagated over the
yeah,
last centuries. And actually
yeah,
we can go, hang on a minute, we can be ourselves here.
yeah. It's true. And I had a call. I think you could describe it as a bit of an epiphany, if you like. Certainly, when I was deciding to transition, but actually, I can trace that epiphany moment years before, because I've got two kids, and I didn't give birth to my kids. Let's get that straight. I didn't. They've got a mom, and I'm not mom. I'm still dad. And but my partner at the time, we were both nurses. We were both senior nurses, and one of us had to pack work in and look after well, certainly the first child, and then 2 years later the second one. And so one of us had to decide to abandon the career, if you like, at the time, or temporarily, or even permanently. And that fell to me. There are reasons for that. I was actually involved in another industry as well. I was a bookseller, and I had that interest, and that was the formation of a business. But I actually walked away from a very good career as a technical theatre nurse, operating theatres. And I started as I became what I described myself at the time as a Mr. Mom. I used to laugh about it because I'd go and pick the kids up from, or the kid, or both of them actually, in later years. I'd go and pick them up from school, and junior school and primary school, and I'd be the only male in the playground at 3 o'clock in the afternoon picking my kids up. And it was great. I had a bit of a flock around me. I loved it. And I did actually hear that term, Mr. Mom. And I used to love it. And I felt so comfortable in that role. And it was an epiphany moment. I realized that there were aspects of my masculinity then that weren't masculine. And essentially, I started to look at life from that moment on. I started to look at life differently, and which, of course, went much deeper and much deeper and much deeper, way into my 40s. And I got to the end of my 40s, and I realized that I'd been fighting my gender issues for 50 years, and it couldn't go any further. I could not happily live life any longer being a fake, because I actually felt that I was faking being. By this time I was thinking, I'm faking being a man. It's ridiculous. I don't feel like a man. And then I look back at and I'm sure you've done it, I look back at my life before transition, and it was like stepping stones all the way through to where I was now, of the signs that I'd got a female mind, a female brain in a male body, and something had to change. It just had to alter. And I'd done, the usual things that a lot of trans women do. When you look back on their life, they've been in the military, or they've done very masculine things. Oh, some of the things I've done have been so masculine, it's just unbelievable. But that's because I was proving myself. I was proving my testosterone, and hey, look, basically that's what I was doing, showing my muscles and doing that. And it's all a lie, because as soon as I went on hormones, I realized it was like a big weight coming off, and I realized that, wow, this is it. This is what I should feel like. And how liberating it felt to take that yoke, that masculine yoke off, and throw it in the corner and say, that's it, not having you anymore. And that liberation has stayed with me ever since. I could never imagine going back to that. It would be unbelievably cruel to return to that. And I don't think people who are anti-trans realize the depths of our transition, how deep it is, and how permanent it is. For what, 99% of us, it's permanent. We're not going to turn around. We don't want to walk back through that door. It was locked. You know, I'd have it sealed up and bricked up behind me. I'm quite happy to do that. That's how firm I am about my progress, if you like, and where I am now in society. So I think we've got a lot to offer society, and I think it's time that people like the mainstream media. I'm very grateful for the media. Sorry.
No, don't apologise. As you were talking, I was thinking. Do you remember that? I think it was a Disney Pixar film called Inside Out, and there's these characters in someone's head, and they've got these sort of balls, and they put them into chutes for the memories. And one of the characters is kind of like this grumpy red blokey character, and he keeps driving the head and keeps taking over and pushing everybody out of the way. And at the end, they gag the male character, and then the women start driving the personality. And that's how I felt. I had this grumpy, blokey character in my head, silencing all my female voices, all of the things that were going on, taking over all the time, talking for me, putting words into my mouth that my brain didn't want to use, doing things that I didn't want to be. And finally, as you say, the transition, I always think about, people talk about male and female brains. For me, it's around that testosterone and lack of testosterone, estrogen, lack of estrogen. So going from a brain that has testosterone driving emotions and thoughts versus a brain that's driven by estrogen is a completely different way of looking at life. And so by stopping the testosterone feed and pushing in the estrogen, I was able to silence that entity in my head that didn't really have a place. And now I don't know how you feel, but I have when I'm quiet, I have peace in my head. When I have one voice, I have one me. I don't have this conflict, this argument, this dealing with the aftermath of situations that I got myself into and went, why am I doing this? It's someone's remote controlling my body. I don't like this. This is not where I want to be. And then trying to deal with it. But now I feel completely in control of who I am. Silence when it's quiet. There's no conflict in my head. There's nothing going on. And it's just this one voice, one me. That's the difference I've noticed. And I can't even remember what it's like now because it's been, 5 or 6 years. I've almost forgotten about how noisy and distracting and conflicting it was. I'm just relaxed and calm, and that's for me the significant part. Allowing me to be me, not driven by somebody else. I think that's a significant difference I've noticed.
I can concur with that, and I actually call estrogen Mistress Estrogen. I laughingly call her that because I see estrogen very much in a female form, and I've said a number of times how grateful I am to Mistress Estrogen for taking care of me. But it does change the way you think about yourself and your family, but it also changes how you think about the world. And just going back to what you said before, pre-transition, I hadn't had zero interest or experience of the LGBT world. It was like I used to read about it and hear about it on the news, radio, television, and in the newspapers before I abandoned reading newspapers. And there it was the great LGBT in capital letters, and I never got involved in it. And literally, the moment I started to take hormones, I was thrown into this world surrounded by these big letters. And had to find my place in that world and where I fitted. But I certainly did belong in it because society told me, you now belong into that world and that's where you are. And I found my place now in that world. I know exactly where I am. But I had to literally go online at the time and start looking up words, starting to understand what the LGBT system and world is all about and what it constitutes and whereabouts I am on it. So I had to do literally a crash course in diversity, and that taught me so much about how little, as you said from before, how I'd ignored this, if you like, for nearly 50 years. And got away with it. Basically, I'd got away with it, not bothering. And all of a sudden, because it affects my life and how I live it and how society views me, I had to be crashed into it and to understand how it works and where we fit in it. So, of course, now I'm a big advocate for not only the trans part, the big T, but I'm also a big advocate for every other aspect, every single one of them, because we're all on this diversity, merry-go-round, if you like. We're all on it together, and we're all fighting the same battle in different ways, but we're all fighting the same issues. And I think that's why it's important that we stay together and look after each other and support each other, So I'm very happy to stand for lesbian women and, gay men and bisexual people and non-binary people. I think non-binary people especially get a really bad do. As you said before, there's no legal definition on passports. Actually, there is. There are a couple of countries around the world. One of them is Australia, by the way, where you can have an X on your passport.
And the US, there's certain states in the US now. I think Malta and Denmark. I think Germany now have a third gender as well. So there are a few in the world, yeah.
There are a few, and they're growing. And I think Ireland, of all places, I think they've got it. And rightly or wrongly, having an X. Now, let me just tell you about an X, which is one of the worries, because I worked in the Middle East for 4 years, and I worked in Saudi and Abu Dhabi and around that region back in the 80s. I wasn't transgender. I wasn't gay. I wasn't a gay man, by the way. I lived out there, as a hetero male, no problem whatsoever. But I understand what it's like to live in that society. It's tough. It's tough if you're not. It's a tough society if you're not heterosexual and you're not Arab. It's a tough society to live in. And one of the big worries I have about an X on a passport, and this has got to be dealt with at some stage in the future, but one of the big worries of an X is it's an identification of somebody's gender status, or actually non-gender status, if you like. And we're going to have to educate at some stage. This might not be our generation that can do this. It might be the next generation that are going to be dealing with this, and I suspect that it is. They're going to have to educate people. Places like Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all those westernized but Arab countries who are firmly against being gay or lesbian or transgender for that matter, and who would take a passport with an X on it and actually draw that person out on the basis that that's identified them as something different. Now, I've traveled to Qatar as a trans woman. I've traveled through Qatar, and it was one of the most frightening experiences I've ever had, because I all the time, even though I travelled on a female passport and present entirely as female, it worried me that whilst I was on their territory, that there might be some way they can identify, and then I'm going to get hoiked out. And one of the places I would, and I'd love to go back because I lived there and I loved it, was Abu Dhabi in Dubai. I lived there for a few years and I absolutely loved it. And I want to go back, certainly to Dubai, because it's grown into a city, a massive city now, a beautiful city. And I'm desperate to go on a weekend or, longer and spend some time there, but it's impossible to do. Can't do it. I've had to sort of, come to the fact that it's not something it's not on my bucket list anymore. It's had to be crossed off, which is it's very sad because, I do have memories there, and I do have places there that mean a lot to me. Well, certainly 2 places there. And Saudi Arabia is the same, although Saudi Arabia is still very much a closed country, and I can't see it opening up, not in my lifetime, probably not in the next generation's lifetime either. But I think we do have to be concerned about a marker, and
I agree that it signposts more, certainly in countries where LGBTQ plus acceptance isn't the same as everywhere else in the world. And I'm very conscious as a trans woman as well. I flew to Melbourne last 2019, I think it was, and it's where do you go? Do you go via China? Do you go via Emirates? You have to fly Emirates via Dubai, and I had to decide that Hong Kong I felt was my least worst option, as being a kind of less likely for me to have a problem as a trans woman flying. I didn't want to fly Emirates. I didn't want to go through Dubai. People have told me I would probably be okay, wouldn't be an issue, but I didn't want to take that chance. And I've had offers for speaking in Russia, and I didn't get it in the end, but I was in 2 months whether I accepted it, and I actually went to Kiev in Ukraine, and I was a bit nervous about going there, but as it turned out, Kiev was very, very cosmopolitan. No one noticed me. I think because certain countries aren't hyper focused on trans people, that they don't even see you, and it's maybe we're more noticeable in countries like the US and the UK and other where trans people are more open. But I had no trouble in Kiev, in Tallinn, and other countries around the world. But I'm still a bit nervous. I was nervous when I went to Tel Aviv, because you hear all these stories about the Israeli Secret Service and all that kind of thing. But I had no trouble going into the country. I had no trouble being at the Wailing Wall on the right-hand side, having previously 20 years earlier been on the left-hand side, wearing my shawl and my skirt and everything without everyone batting an eyelid. And when I exited the country, I know people often get very interrogated leaving out of Tel Aviv, but the security kind of looked at me, asked me a couple of questions, and just waved me on. Maybe I was too difficult. I don't know. But my experience so far has been positive in the countries I've traveled to, but I'm also very conscious about the fact that a lot of the world is now inaccessible to me. Because I was born in Singapore. I've been back there once 20 odd years ago, but I know that I probably wouldn't want to go back to Singapore again. I certainly couldn't go back to Malaysia, where I lived with my family just after I was born. So I'm very conscious that I can't put my transiness away. But I know there are some people who identify maybe as gay or lesbian that have, I was going to say, they have they can pack their gayness away in their trunk, do their job and come home. They may not be able to share their hotel room with their partner. They may not be able to do other things. They may not be able to talk about their home relationship. They've got to be careful about their social media postings. But they can sometimes function if they want to, because you're not as necessarily visible. Whereas trans people, we carry ourselves wherever we go. We are us, and we're worried about getting caught, getting arrested, getting imprisoned, getting all there's other things that can happen to us, lynched in a toilet in America or something.
Yeah,
shot.
that's exactly right. And I have travelled during transition. I travelled extensively back and forth between here and Australia and Perth and Sydney and here 2 or 3 times during my initial transition period. And I did go through Singapore with some trepidation, although if it boiled down to it now, and it will do, because I have children in Perth, I would happily travel through Singapore. Happily. I came back through Singapore when I came back to live here, and I'd do it again with no problem whatsoever. I felt and I stayed over in Singapore as well. I felt very comfortable. I didn't feel threatened, although I have read things online. But the world is, it's shrunken down now. Like, as you say, it's shrunken down to very narrow corridors. If I want to go, and I do consider Australia, by the way, as home. I live here in the UK, but I don't recognise the UK as my home. My home is Australia. And I always think, I'm always thinking about the corridors to get back. So one of the corridors is, of course, as you've identified, is Hong Kong. And another one is Singapore. And I wouldn't go through Qatar. But the other one that worries me intensely is the way from across to America and across the States, and then Hawaii, and then on to Singapore. There are, especially the southern states of America, definitely are to be avoided, I think. And I don't think that a lot of cis people, I identified this in one of my radio programs actually earlier this year. I did a spoof program about travel to Europe, and where I pretended I was traveling to Europe, and it was a big laugh. We had a great ball doing this one. I pretended that we were going to Europe, and I visited each country. But why I did it that way was I wanted to get across to trans people who were interested in the trans experience, who might not understand us too well, or even our allies. I wanted to get across to them that the world was narrow and how tight it was, and that we, even in our own European area, there were places that were not viable to go to for us, or not safe. And so I did go to Poland, and I just identified a couple of issues then going on in Poland, which have got worse, by the way. And then I hopped over down into Europe and Germany, and presented the program as though I was traveling through, and it was brilliant. I loved it. We had a ball making it. It was a big laugh, and then we came back to Éire, or Ireland, and that allowed me to express just how forward-thinking Ireland has become, and how it's only 100 miles away from I don't know how far, but 100 miles maybe. And the difference in thinking between one country and another that speaks the same language, and we're essentially the same people. And it was just a great illustration of how the world has shrunken down for us, and how frightening that is for people like us, and especially you, because I know I have seen you on Facebook and what you do on Facebook and how you travel. And I did see that you went to Kiev, and how lovely to go there. I'd love to go to Kiev. But how you've traveled there, and I thought, oh my God, that's a bit risky. But then I thought, well, hey, is it risky? Let's see. And obviously it's been okay for you. But I mean, holidays, there's certain places I wouldn't holiday in. Outside of the UK, I would think twice about going to certain places in Europe. Although Malta, I believe Malta's brilliant. Plus, I love Malta anyway. So our world is pretty narrow.
I've had no problems in what the traditional Western Europe, so
Yeah,
Italy, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Balearics, Canary Islands, Amsterdam, to Netherlands. I've had no problems in those at all. I've
yeah,
travelled extensively before to Sweden,
yeah,
Finland, and I wouldn't perceive I would have a problem in those countries if I went back there now. So
yeah,
yeah, I think it's just the further east you go, you've just got to be more cautious. And
yeah,
I think the mantra I would have is don't carry your flag with you. So if you can go there as a trans person, you can go there as a gay person, but it's
yeah,
around not, I think as they would describe it, not promoting the gay agenda or the trans, whatever that gay agenda might be, but
yeah,
it's not propagating conversations around being trans or being. So if you just want to go there and be you, have a holiday, I
yeah,
suspect many places you will actually have no problem. If you started waving a flag around and started promoting trans rights in Poland, you probably get short shrift. But if you just went there as a trans woman, you probably have a reasonable time. If you were in maybe the core towns like Gdansk or Warsaw or one of the major places, if you were there on a package or in a corporate hotel, you probably again have a reasonably seamless experience. I think the panic really is where you maybe stray off of the path into activism, into promotion, or into public signs of affection. Maybe if you were a
yeah,
same-sex couple holding hands, then you were going to have issues. If my wife and I kept 2 foot apart and we're just friends, again, I suspect we'd be fine in most of these countries.
yeah,
So yeah, it's just recognizing we have to double think about how we're safe. And but the thing is, I don't know about you, but every time I go to a toilet at a motorway service station, you walk into this. It's like a chicane, isn't it? You walk in, you go right, you go left, and go, and you've got no idea what's behind. And often it's often a queue of 50 women waiting for the cubicles. But you're suddenly in this zone where you feel very vulnerable, looking around over your shoulder, going, "I feel very uncomfortable here. I feel very people's eyes are on me, and I feel so uncomfortable. I can't wait to pee and get out again."
yeah.
And I don't know if you felt the same, but those are really high anxiety places where you just feel kind of under threat, even though whether it's perceived or real, I don't know. But I
Yeah.
often struggle with those sort of environments.
Yeah, I don't get it acutely, but I get what we call imposter syndrome.
Mm.
I've had it a couple of times, and I've felt a couple of times. I've never felt threatened anywhere, but I have felt I want to get in and I want to get out fast. Only a couple of times. I've got one memorable one where and it was in a nightclub. It's about 2 years ago. It was in Manchester actually, and there was a big queue of women, and I got stuck in this queue, and it was just the best. It was, it ended up because we were all waiting to do the thing, and the conversation was just surreal conversation. Not about me being trans because nobody knew, but it was. It was actually more about my age because everybody else around me was like in their 20s, and there I am, this old woman, and I was getting propelled forward by some women like, "You go next. You go. Are you all right? Are you all right? Are you okay?" And I thought, well, I am actually, but yeah. And what I want, I did know that funny story. I did notice that some of them were going in pairs, and that's what women do. Some women go in, some women go into the toilet in pairs. Friends do. And I was dreading it. I thought, oh my God, I hope nobody comes with me. Because I just don't know what to do in that situation. But it did make me laugh at the time. But
Well,
yeah, I've had that
I
dreaded.
like you. I'm like you. I'm quite an ample lady. So the thought of getting 2 people in a toilet cubicle when I'm in there is sort of like, we won't fit. Trust me, we're not going to fit. Hang
Well,
back, please.
I think you're right there. I think that's why I was safe, because there's only me. There's definitely only me able to get in some of these cubicles. I mean, I think we should stand up for women's rights here and say, look, you need to make. When you look at a man's cubicle and you look at a female cubicle, they're not the same. The dimensions are not. Male cubicles are built for men, big men with big muscles. ladies' cubicles are made for petite women, to do their thing and hang their handbag on the back of the door, and that's all they're fit for. And I think so. We need to stand up for. Maybe we can do that and say, look, let's have a change in dimensions, please.
Bigger toilets, please. Yeah. Yes.
Can you imagine
they're not. Well, time you've got your handbag, your coat, your scarf, and all the other things you take in there with you, and then the hook's not there, then you've got to try and balance everything, and then the lock on the door doesn't work, and it's like, it's just
I've had that too, where you have to stick your foot in, you have to stick your foot out because that door is going to come bashing onto your foot any second now. And because people will have a tendency, as to push first and then wait for an answer. And somebody actually put that online a couple of days ago. What do you do? It wasn't a trans person, it was a female. What do you do when you're in a cubicle and the lock doesn't work? How do you alert people? Do you sing or whatever? And I wrote to them and I said, you just say, when it's stick your leg out, and when it's pushed, you just say it's taken, and they'll soon go.
I just shout, oi, oi, oi.
Hopefully I've given some friendly advice there to another lady who has to negotiate the toilet system in this country. Oh dear.
Rachel, it's been an absolute blast. I can't believe we've been nattering away now for over an hour. We've been nattering away.
Oh wow.
It's been absolutely superb. Thank you so much for your insights and your straight talking Aussie mixed with northern straightness. I think it's been fantastic. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
How can people get in contact with you if they want to get in contact?
You can
LinkedIn or Facebook or just Google you.
I am on Facebook. I'm openly on Facebook as Rachel Oliver. You'll see my happy, smiling face. When I did First Dates last year, and also I did Steph's Packed Lunch as well. Couple of episodes of that, and I recently did a course in TV presenting. So I'm hoping to pick some work up actually because I do voiceover work for my station. And have done a couple of specials for them. So I'm hoping to pick stuff up that way. But you can get me on Facebook easily. You'll easily find me.
Fantastic.
And if you want to listen to my show, you can go on www.sonderadio.com. And you can. It's very easy to find. And once you're on there, they'll tell you where to go. Or if you want to listen to my past performances, my podcasts, and there's about 23, 24 of them at the moment on Mixcloud, and it's free to listen to on Mixcloud. Just type in Rachel Oliver and you'll get all my shows. And
so just to clarify, Sonder Radio, that's SONDER radio.com, SONDERRADIO.com, and they can listen to your show there, yeah?
They can listen to all the output of Sonder Radio, including mine. There's a little section for Rachel Oliver. And podcasts. The day after my show is released on radio, on Sonder, it goes automatically uploaded onto Mixcloud podcasts. And it's there in perpetuity. So you can go and listen to, honestly, the subjects I've covered are immense. I just did a conspiracy show last week, actually. It was quite an interesting thing, and there's lots of humor. I'm on
there now. I found Sonder Radio, and I found there's a menu option called Our Presenters. I found you on there, and I'm now looking at your bio, the gorgeous photo of you with a Shure SM7B microphone stuck in front of your face, and all your episodes are listed there, so I can see that. Absolutely fantastic. So people can certainly tune in and find out more. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. I'm sure there's by the way, I have a no repeat policy, which is very important to me. So you can actually listen to 22 hours of me prattling on like a 2-bob watch, but you'll never hear the same music twice.
Excellent. That's unlike my playlist. I have the same artists on repeat often, so I do like my earworms to ring out. So thank you Anyway, so thank you so much. It's been a joy and a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and also a huge thank you to the listeners who've listened this far. Thank you for tuning in. Please do subscribe to keep updated on future episodes of the Inclusion Bites podcast. That's BITES. Tell your friends, tell your colleagues. Please share. I have a number of other exciting guests lined up that I'm sure you'll be also inspired by over the next few weeks and months. And also remember, if you'd like to be a guest, then please let me know. And I would always welcome feedback and suggestions on how I can improve the show to joe.lockwood@seechangehappen.co.uk. So finally, my name is Joanne Lockwood. It's been an absolute pleasure to host this podcast for you today. Catch you next time. Bye.